What to do when your partner cannot fathom that consequences won't stop the hitting. My name's Jodie Thornton, and this is a really common dynamic where we have one partner who understands what is developmentally expected for children, and also what is useful and helpful in helping children change their behaviour. And we have one partner who is less likely to be keeping up with the research, perhaps refusing to read articles that you send them, and really bought into the old school approach that the only way to change things is to use consequences. And so we have some parents who focus on rewards and some parents that focus on consequences. Generally speaking, a parent who's focusing on consequences is probably more on the punishment side of things rather than the reward side of things. But what we know is that someone who cannot fathom that consequences aren't required, we know that that parent is not actually interested in reading what is current in childhood development, because there's such an enormous amount of information about how hitting is developmentally normal, about how at young ages our children don't have impulse control, but if they do have impulse control it might be hit and miss. But also for children who are older and struggling with hitting, consequences is still not going to be the way. It's not the fastest way, nor is it the most effective way to actually get your child to stop hitting. And so what we really want to recognize is that for somebody who is stuck in that space, the chances of them reading another article that you send to them is next to zero. The chances of them believing that, like agreeing that not giving them consequences is going to work better in the long run, next to zero. What we really want to do is focus on what we can do, and really doubling down on what we know to be developmentally appropriate for our children, so that we help our children to become more emotionally aware and reduce the reliance on the impulse to hit, but also so that our partner can see in real time what it looks like to reduce the hitting without consequences. What we see in a lot of parenting spaces, it is either parents, gentle parents, or it is the parenting coaches or the parenting experts that are basically just saying hitting is normal, so we just accept it. We'll say things like we don't hit, or it's okay to be angry but it's not okay to hit. But those things don't actually help our children to stop hitting, and they also don't actually help our children to get out of the awful feelings that they're having that lead to the hitting, right? So what we want to do is move beyond that into something that's more constructive. So what do we do? Number one, I want you to really reinforce for yourself your belief in what is appropriate for your child. So even though your partner might be criticizing, your partner might be complaining, your partner might be questioning your approaches, I want you to be really certain for yourself that consequences is not the right way to go. The reason I want this is not because I don't believe that you get it, but it's actually because if you don't feel really solid in yourself, when your partner criticizes or when your partner is questioning your approach, your response won't be a regulated, grounded, yeah, but consequences isn't going to work, right? It's just not a strategy that works. Your response is going to be triggered, it's going to be agitated, it's going to be critical of them in reverse. You're not going to hold yourself well. And while you've got a child who's in a hitting stage, the last thing you need is ongoing conflict with your partner. So, or at least the last thing you need, well, yes, the last thing you need, but also the last thing you need is escalating conflict with your partner, right? So what we want to do is really get solid in that belief. So number one, we know, of course, that impulse control doesn't develop until at least age 4. And after age 4, it's hit and miss. And even for a child that's past that stage, that they really do have the impulse control, here's what we know about consequences. The idea of consequences only works on the basis that I want you to stop paying attention to what's important to you and start paying attention to what I think should be important to you. And if we use a reward to achieve that, we're giving them a good reason, something that they want. If we use punishment, we're giving them a bad reason, right? But either way, what we're saying is, I want you to stop paying attention to what's important to you. I want you to start paying attention to what I think should be important to you. Now, that inherently undermines their emotional awareness. It inherently undermines their connection to what they need. It inherently undermines the development of their own sense of self, right? All of these things are things we're trying to avoid because we all know what it's like to have to unpack those things as adults, right? And you know this, but I'm giving you this in a really direct language so that you can really believe it. This is not the right way to go, and I'll rephrase that. Rather than it's not the right way to go, it is a slower way to go because you have to disconnect your child from what's important to them, right? It is slower. Secondly, it causes all of these consequences for your child that they will need to unpack at some stage later down the track, right? So you know that consequences are not going to help your child to stop hitting. You know that what's really going to work is helping your child figure out what is causing the impulse to hit and getting that need met in a way that doesn't involve negatively impacting somebody else. So whether that's hitting, whether that's treating someone else poorly, whatever the issue is, we want to get that need met without negatively impacting other people. So that's our number one thing, is to really look at what it is that we believe about the hitting, right? That's our number one thing. Our number two part here is to actually look at keeping your child as regulated as possible. And so what we want to do there is basically, if we imagine that your child has a window of tolerance, and so I'll use my hands to show like a distance of a window of tolerance. In that window of tolerance, your child can handle more and more emotional dysregulation until they get to their limit. And once they reach their limit, that's when the impulsive behavior comes out. So that can be hitting, it can be tantrums, it can be all sorts of other things. But what we want to do is make sure that your child has the largest window of tolerance as possible, so that when things are happening that might cause them to hit, they've actually got a little bit more room to cope. So how do we do that? Bring in to your life as much fun as possible. We want your child to be laughing as much as possible. This doesn't mean try to make your child laugh when they are angry. I'm talking about bringing playfulness and fun into your routine. So say, for example, you know that they are very likely to hit when it gets towards their nap time. Then maybe an hour to 2 hours before their nap time, you're going to be doing something that's specifically intended to make them laugh. That gives their nervous system a signal, I must be safe if I'm laughing, right? That I must be. And so we want to just bring that in as much as we can. We also want to make sure that your child is getting enough to eat, which can be really tough for children who are in those really busy toddler stages where they're just not that interested in eating, but then they get so hungry that it impacts their behavior. It can be tough, but we want to do as much as you can to get your child to have enough food as often as they need it. Make sure that they're drinking enough water, making sure that they're getting enough sleep. And obviously for all of these things, there's only so much we can do. And if we try and push ourselves to be perfect when it's not realistic for us, we'll actually cause more stress for ourselves, which will cause our child to be more on edge. So that kind of is counterproductive, right? But as much as is realistic and possible in your situation, keep your child rested, fed, hydrated, and having fun, and that will give them the biggest window of tolerance to be able to cope with things not going their way before they get the impulse to hit. So we want to do that as much as you can. And then the last thing we want to do is actually build your skills to help your child replace the behavior of hitting with getting the underlying need met. And so when we think about what hitting can come from, it can be anything from that's not fair, you're not doing what I want, you told me no. There's all these surface level reasons for hitting. We also see sometimes children are hitting because they think it's hilarious. They don't realize it hurts. Whatever the issue is that's on the surface, we need to identify what is the underlying need. Is it that I need to feel like I matter? Is it that I need some autonomy? I need to feel like I have choice? Is it that I need to be having fun? Is it that I don't think you're considering what's important to me? You're saying no, but you don't even care. Like, that's arbitrary and you don't care what I want, right? Whatever the underlying need is, we want to get that identified and get that need met so that they don't have to hit as a response for them because the need is not getting met, right? That's the key to stopping the hitting sustainably. It is much faster than any consequence approach you can possibly use because your child is actually feeling better within themselves. There's a process that we can use to do that where we look at helping our child have more emotional awareness so that they recognize the need is unmet before they get overwhelmed. We can change how we handle them during the moment that they hit, and we can talk to them about it afterwards. And if you'd like a step-by-step on that process, you can grab my free webinar on helping children stop hitting at jodithornton.com/hitting. So that webinar, you can grab that video at any time, and it'll take you through that step-by-step process of figuring out how do I work out what's underneath what my child's behavior is doing, and then help them to stop hitting before they get that impulse to hit, rather than getting them to see that I have this big feeling, I think hitting would work, but I'm going to choose something else. Like, that's the bit that's unrealistic. That's the piece where we want to move away from we don't hit, it's okay to be angry, it's not okay to hit. All of those things, they're basically, so a lot of the gentle parenting approaches, they basically say, you have a big feeling, you should cope with that big feeling. You should be okay with the fact that you are uncomfortable. You should be okay with that. It's not fair and it's not realistic. As we mature, we get a little bit more tolerance to having our needs unmet while we figure it out. But I actually don't want any person believing that they should go an extended period of time without their needs being met. We want to be able to have enough I can't think of a better word, there's self-control, right? We want to have enough ability to cope so that we have time to problem solve, but we don't want to train not just children but ourselves. We don't want to train ourselves to get to a place where we can cope with our needs being unmet for an extended period of time. We want to focus on actually getting the need met. So that's your homework for addressing when your partner just cannot fathom that consequences is not the right approach for hitting. Number one, double down on your belief as to why, so that when they want to talk to you about it, you don't respond in a triggered fashion, and you spend less time worrying and replaying conversations with your partner, less time trying to find someone who can explain to somebody who is not interested in reading parenting articles to understand, more time actually fixing the problem. We want to spend some time making sure that your child is regulated as often as possible to reduce the chance that they get overwhelmed and therefore have the impulse to hit. And then lastly, we want to actually build the skills to find that underlying need and get it met without the impulse to hit even coming up. So if you have any questions at all, please do let me know. Otherwise, grab that webinar to give you the step-by-step of how to build your skills up. It's jodithornton.com/hitting.